With Valentine's Day just passed, we thought this might be a good time to talk about the heart, in particular, the largest heart study ever completed on board the space station. Lori Meggs at the Payload Operations Center at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center is going to tell us more. Lori?
Valentine's Day is sometimes used to measure how big or how small our heart is. One study actually measured the size of the heart of astronauts on the space station to see how microgravity may or may not affect it. It's one study that, according to the co-investigator, is already changing lives on Earth.
The ICV, or Integrated Cardiovascular study, was the largest and most ambitious study of the cardiovascular adaptation to long-term spaceflight ever attempted. We studied 14 astronauts before and during and after 6 months on the space station, and we did a very comprehensive set of evaluations. Before and afterwards, we used cardiac MRI, very advanced cardiac imaging, to look at cardiac morphology and structure, since we originally had hypothesized that the heart atrophies and shrinks with long-duration spaceflight about 1% a week. We quantified the work of the heart by putting a little finger blood pressure device and measuring the amount of work the heart was doing with each heartbeat. Over the course of 24 hours, we looked at advanced electrophysiology. We used echocardiography, novel imaging techniques, 2 and 3D imaging at multiple gravitational gradients. So space, which is equivalent, which is lying flat, Mars equivalent, right, and then Earth equivalent. So it allowed us to calibrate what we saw in space. And then, perhaps even more important, on landing day, we studied them again at Mars gravity, which is the first time anyone has ever evaluated the cardiovascular system if an astronaut were to land on Mars after 6 months in flight.
What'd you find?
Well, interestingly, you know, the astronauts right now do a lot of exercise on flight. And so our least fit astronauts, the ones who were least fit before they left, actually became fitter. Instead of getting smaller, their hearts got bigger. And because we were quantifying the amount of work of the heart, we could show that the more work the heart did in space compared to beforehand, the more the heart got bigger. In contrast, the most fit astronauts tended to lose some heart muscle, but not nearly as much as we had predicted because of all the countermeasures. So at the end of the day, with the kind of countermeasures we're doing in flight, the heart adapts pretty well.
But basically, overall, we're studying, they're healthy. The astronauts are healthy people.
That's right.
How does this relate to folks on Earth who may not be as healthy and as fit as them?
Sure. Well, perhaps the best example is patients who have what we call orthostatic intolerance, or the inability to stand up. In fact, there's a group of patients, mostly young women, called the postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, who can't stand up for long periods of time. Their hearts are beating really, really fast, and they get lightheaded and dizzy, and it turns out that their physiology is very similar to astronauts. And so their hearts get really, really small, just like astronauts do. And based on what we learned from studying astronauts and our bed rest studies, we know that if you can keep the heart from shrinking, you can prevent or reverse this syndrome. And we've now studied hundreds of women around the world and changed the lives of many of them. I get emails all the time, "Dr. Levine, you've given me my life back."
Wow, that's something too.
It is quite compelling. And it's all based on the work we did with NASA, trying to understand what happens to the heart in space.
And taking a live look into the Payload Operations Integration Center, Tim Horvath is the Payload Operations Director today, leading the team of flight controllers here in assisting the crew with all of those busy science activities. And Penny Pettigrew is the PACOM, assisted by Crystal Morgan today. That'll do it for us here from the Payload Operations Integration Center. Now back to you at Mission Control in Houston.